We've got a few other games we want to talk about. We're going to kind of clump them all into one little segment because we don't have a ton of stats to talk about them, and they're teams that lost or were in pretty ugly games. But they are due a mention. So first off, Vanderbilt and Georgia, and I'm going to step on your toes a little bit in this one because I'm going to dig in some numbers before you can get to them because I have a feeling that you were already going to get to them. So Vanderbilt, Georgia, the biggest statistical anomaly I think I've ever seen in a losing team. Here's some numbers for you. Georgia, we all know, lost to Vanderbilt. Georgia had 421 total yards. Vanderbilt, 171 total yards. Georgia had 23 first downs. Vanderbilt had 9. 8.6 yards per pass for Georgia, 6.1. 346 in the air for Georgia to 109. Penalties were about the same, and no turnovers for either team. That is a stat sheet domination, and you lose the game. So, Husky Pup, tell me what the hell happened in this game. I watched it. It was ugly. I still don't know what I saw. Tell me what happened.
Vanderbilt had one drive.
The first one?
Well, the first one was a kickoff, right? I mean, they returned the opening.
That's kind of what I was getting at.
I mean, there was one drive in the entire game that Vanderbilt managed, and we talk about this sometimes. If the score is too low, you're in serious trouble because there is a variance aspect of football where random stuff will happen. Kickoffs, I know it's not truly random. I get that. They're players playing against each other. But, on a kickoff, it just takes one guy tripping and falling down or losing his balance and getting blocked off his feet for that to end up in a touchdown. And that's what happened here. Vandy opened the game with a kickoff for a touchdown. Georgia gets 2 field goals, and that's it, the entire first half, right? Until the last drive of the first half, Vanderbilt's longest drive was 4 plays in the entire half, and they were winning. Georgia had more plays in their drive that ended up in the second field goal, 14 plays, than Vanderbilt had to that point in the game. It's just kind of mind-boggling. Let me 2, 5, 8, 26 plays Vanderbilt ran in the first half. I mean, it just that was it.
That is not basketball on ground.
No, it is not whatsoever. And then, as I said, the entire game was one drive, and that was the drive that started at the beginning of the fourth quarter when Vanderbilt scored their second touchdown. They had a pass for 27 yards on second down, and then they had a pass for 37 yards. Those 2 passes, 64 yards passing. Yeah, that was 60% of Vandy's passing in the ball game. Vandy only had 109 yards in the entire game passing the ball. 64 came on 2 plays in the same drive. So even when you look at that yards per pass number, 6.1, not real high, it's like, yeah, they had 2 yards per attempt for the rest of the game, except for that one stupid drive. And the flip side is, Georgia, 421 yards is not insignificant, and you would hope to score more than 16 points off 420 yards of offense. But Vandy just played, bend but don't break defense, waited for Georgia to make a mistake. Again, we've talked about that Georgia goes as far as Eason can carry them. I know Eason struggled in this game quite a bit. He wasn't overly accurate. The problem is Georgia could not run the ball at all. Chubb had 2.5 yards per carry, and he was the best they had. So, a lot of it was just due to offensive line struggles. A lot of their struggles are due to the fact they don't really have any explosive receivers. Isaiah McKenzie is pretty explosive. I get that, but McKenzie is not a number 1 receiving target. He's the kind of guy you want as a second or third option slot receiver, using a short passing game and sort of make an explosive play where everybody's focused on someone else. But McKenzie doesn't have the size or strength or what have you to be the feature player. He really shouldn't be. I guess a good example of that is Dexter McCluster when he was at Ole Miss. He was an extremely good player, but you don't really want to focus on Dexter McCluster. He's much, much better when he's, as a secondary role, he's phenomenal. But if that guy's your focus, he doesn't have some of the physical attributes you want to be able to carry the team. So, yeah, I mean, that's the story at the end of the day. Georgia could not sustain drives and execute, had way too many field goals. 2 field goals early in the first half, one from the Vandy 5, and another from a decent one at the 28. But you got to punch some of those in, actually get some points on the board, so that when you get to the end of this ball game, you don't lose. Basically, they lost on a single drive.
We're back to the same thing that we've been talking about for Georgia all year long, and it's offensive line. Nick Chubb 2.5 yards per carry, Sonny Michel 2.2, team 2.1. Of course, they still beat Vanderbilt, who ran it for 1.9 yards per carry. Eason, I'll disagree with you a little bit. He was 27 of 40, 346 yards, 8.6 per with no interceptions. He was not super erratic, but he wasn't consistent in terms of he would do well, and then just have a brain fart. And it's funny because I had to leave, run a quick errand in the middle of the game, and I was listening to the Georgia broadcast, and they were talking about how, for the first couple of quarters, they were talking about how, we're not winning, but Eason is really coming along. He's looking a lot better. He's looking a lot surer of himself. And that theme kept repeating, but the game kept getting closer and closer to the end. And it's like, Eason's doing a decent job, but this is the opposite of what we were talking about with Arkansas and Ole Miss, how Arkansas approached it. Georgia couldn't run the ball, so it really didn't matter that Eason put up 346 yards. But to your point about 420 yards being pretty good, Florida, who also struggled with Vanderbilt offensively, scored 13 points, and they had 236 yards. They were actually outgained by Vanderbilt. So just to put that in perspective, from a actual statistical performance, Georgia didn't do a bad job, but man, they just got no points. None at all.
Yeah, I guess reasonable minds are going to kind of vary on Eason's job. I felt like Vandy was daring Eason to throw, in that if he executed at an above average level, he would have had some pretty gaudy statistics. That was my view. I felt like Vandy, this is just my eye on it, but my take was that Vandy was crashing on the run game, and Eason couldn't capitalize. But yeah, it's kind of amazing that they could have that many yards and not score enough points. And as a small segue, they've got, Georgia has 421 yards, and that's only scored 16 points, and that's 100 yards more than BYU had to score 28 and beat Mississippi State.
Yeah, that's.
You made me talk numbers, by the way, and even though I said I wouldn't, so our listeners can blame you for that.
No, I think we could not pass off the Georgia Vanderbilt numbers because that was just so crazy. But okay, let's get into BYU Mississippi State. This is a game that you and I both said Mississippi State would probably lose, but needed to win if they wanted to go to a bowl. Your preseason projection that Mississippi State would not go to a bowl is going to materialize. So what do we see here? Is it as bad as Mississippi State fans feel right now, or is there a light at the end of the tunnel that's not a train?
We'll go with both. Right now it is that bad. I'm not going to necessarily sugarcoat it. It's shocking, I know, to the people that listen to this that I wouldn't sugarcoat something. But, again, how many times have we talked about this? Second leading rusher for Mississippi State, that would be Nick Fitzgerald, at only 2.6 yards per carry. Every other back in that game averaged more than him, but he had about a third of the carries for Mississippi State. The leader was Williams, and he averaged 4 yards a carry. Not great, but at least something. Fitzgerald was kind of a lost cause when he ran the ball. I mean, he was effective in some scrambles, but generally it ended up wasting plays as much as anything. I will say BYU, not that different. 17 carries for Hill for only 3.1 yards, but I will say nobody else on BYU's team could actually run the ball. But the Light at the end of the tunnel to me is this was the first game where I thought Fitzgerald looked like a competent passer. He took some major steps forward. He was actually executing the offense. Still does some boneheaded things, but I could see sparks of why he's starting for that squad. In the past, I hadn't been able to, or early in this game, I couldn't. I still didn't quite understand why he was the starting quarterback. I see it now. There's some physical tools there that are kind of special as a runner, and he has an arm that does merit some consideration. The problem is he's extremely erratic as a passer, and I think more importantly, the talent level on the squad just is not up to par. Keith Mixon is a decent athlete, and he looks like a stud on this unit. And I think the reason for that is just there's just not much there. There's just not much there for this team to try to generate anything. Offensively, there's not a lot of receivers that are fear you. Fred Ross is probably the best, and he's purely a possession guy, and none of the others are really, frankly, most of them are not really SEC caliber. None of the backs are particularly good, and oh my gosh, at times the line play is just atrocious. But it was a lot more solid in this one, I will say. Versus the last game we watched where against Auburn, that I'm not sure what was going on. I still think the tackles, by the way, in that Auburn game, I think there was a snap count issue. That's my guess, because there were plays where both tackles didn't move, and I think the snap count wasn't getting communicated, so the guards saw the ball move, and they moved with the snap, and the tackles didn't. But
no, it's Carl Lawson is just that fast.
But so my light is, I can see where they have a quarterback now. But the other side of that is I'm not really and I'll say the front seven was very active, but I'm going to be frank, the BYU Cougars are not particularly good. And
they're not, but we've kind of said this all year. Outside of the Auburn game, Mississippi State hasn't been a horrendous defensive team. I mean, they lost to South Alabama 21-20, gave up 14 to South Carolina, 23 to LSU. They're not, when you think of teams that are going to finish the season with 3 or 4 wins, you think of teams that are playing just horrendous defense, and they're not there. I think their offense is probably in that category, but if they have someone that's coming along, maybe that is getting there by the end of the year with some experience, and they have a decent defense, well, that's something you can build on.
No, I agree. They weren't that bad in the second half of the Auburn game. They really weren't. Auburn tried to put it away and really, really struggled to do so once they got up. I mean, they got blown out in the first half, and I get that, but it didn't continue in the second. However, I don't know. There's just not enough pop. I can't see them putting away anybody in the conference with where they're at offensively, unfortunately. And it goes back to what I said at the start of the season, and it goes back to what we've said the past couple of weeks on this show. Mississippi State simply has not recruited at an SEC level. They're last in the division 3 of the last 4 years. The only other team that's finished behind them is Arkansas, and it's showing. And Dak Prescott hit a lot of that because he could make players better than they were. But, an NFL quarterback goes a tremendous way in the game, in a college game. And when you lose one of those guys, if you don't have someone to back him up, all of a sudden all those little flaws you have end up pretty glaring. And that's unfortunately where Mississippi State's at right now.
It's funny. I was listening to Chris Russo, his show on Mad Dog Sports today, and he was talking about, he doesn't talk a whole lot about college stuff. He's not real well-versed on college stuff like most national radio guys. If you listen to him, they're very pro-centric because, major market talk is what matters. And I thought it was hilarious because he said he was shocked at how well Dak Prescott was doing because he views Dak Prescott's worth through the lens of where he was drafted, right? So to him, he was like, he wasn't very good at Mississippi State. And my jaw hit the floor. I'm like, he wasn't very good? Are you kidding? I mean, Mississippi State was winning 9-10 games a year with Dak Prescott plus 4-win talent surrounding him. So I couldn't believe that he said that because I've seen Dak Prescott play. I saw him play incredibly well in the SEC. So it's just funny how perceptions are molded and formed based on not having all the information.
Yeah, I mean, the Mississippi State LSU game was close last year. and that was 110% Dak Prescott. I mean, I was just, my jaw was at the floor watching that game early in the season, and I realized he turned a corner because, and I'm not sure how many people really pick up on the nuances that were going on, but everything Mississippi State did in that game was Dak Prescott making quick reads, getting rid of the ball to his check down before he took pressure, throwing accurate throws in the shorter intermediate game because he didn't really have any true downfield threats, and then hitting the downfield guys when there was any sort of seam in coverage. I mean, it was 100% him. I totally agree. I mean, Prescott was phenomenal at Mississippi State, and to say that he came out of nowhere, it's like, no. I mean, he wasn't drafted high because people didn't really trust his arm, but yeah, I mean, this was a plenty successful college player. So it's just
completely agree. Yeah. It's too bad they don't have something like that right now, because what we really see now is how not having a quarterback at all not having a quarterback at all around really good talent can sometimes be about the same as having a great talent around really terrible talent. So that's it for Miss State and BYU. Not a lot to discover there. One of the game that we preemptively labeled the most boring game of the week, and it turned out to be pretty much the case. Not because of what we thought it was going to be. We thought it was going to be a little bit lower scoring. Missouri lost 14-40 to the Florida Gators, who have, to this point in the year, been pretty anemic on offense. They got Luke Del Rio back, but he put up another game where you're like, okay, if I just saw the score, I'd think he went ham on Missouri's defense. But then I look at his stat line, 18 for 38, 6.2 yards per, 3 interceptions and 1 touchdown. And I think, what the hell? Well, it turns out there's a theme tonight, and that theme is, if you can run it, you can win. 287 yards for Florida, 7.4 per, and Pirine and Scarlett both go over 100. That's your ball game right there. And if Florida can do that with an already good defense, you're in trouble. But again, I think this speaks more to how bad Missouri's defense is than how good Florida's offense is. Tell me if I'm wrong.
I'd agree. We said beforehand, not entirely joking, right? We kind of recommended people not watch this game. I'm going to go ahead and second that and say that unless you're just a really avid Florida fan, you just go ahead and delete it off your DVR. It's good. Florida won. That's all you need to know. Now, they were back. Florida ran the ball very successfully. I will say the Missouri's leading rusher was Crockett. He averaged over 10 yards a carry. So he almost carried the game by himself because nobody else was really close. About best they had was 6 yards a carry otherwise. But everybody on Florida's team averaged 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 yards a carry in this ball game. And a lot of that ended up being in late and garbage time. But as you said, neither team could throw the ball. And this game got out of hand because Missouri, for those that don't know, threw back-to-back pick sixes. It was actually a 3-drive stretch. I'll say it was a 5-drive stretch in the first half where it was Florida interception followed by a Missouri pick six immediately thereafter, followed by an 8-play drive ending in a Missouri pick six, followed by a punt, followed by a Florida interception, followed by a Florida interception. That was a 6-drive stretch of this ball game. Six drives, 5 interceptions. So that's the sort of fun you missed, and you came out of that with Florida up, 20-0
at half.
And yeah, I mean, Florida had only scored 6 offensive points off 2 field goals, and they were up 20-0 in the third quarter.
Drew Lock ended with the lowest QBR I've ever seen, ESPN QBR. 4 of 18, 39 yards, 2.2 per with 2 interceptions. QBR was 0.8. I've never seen that.
Yeah, we've talked about before, different secondaries and the way they play and how it affects things. Florida's secondary is very physical. They're very athletic. They play really aggressively, and Missouri has this short passing game offense. And when you're playing a team that has, Tease Tabor on it, and you're trying to throw the ball short, you let him play at the line of scrimmage. If you can't hold up and throw the ball downfield, hold up at the line of scrimmage and throw the ball downfield, and you let him play to the ball, you're not going to do anything all game. Every pass is going to be disrupted. If you catch it, it's not going to go anywhere, and he's going to jump a couple routes, which he did. And that's what we saw. They just don't have any real, in the Franklin era, they had some serious downfield threats. Dorial Green Beckham could burn you deep. And if you don't have that vertical component and you play a team like Florida with an athletic secondary, it can get ugly awful fast. And I will say Florida at times has been scarily bad about lapses in coverage downfield, and Missouri just couldn't do that. And that was, just delete it. And they want Florida 140-14, and that's really all you need to know. And you'll be happier for knowing only that, I think.
So Florida's sitting at 5-1 overall, 3-1 in the conference. SEC stepped in and said, y'all are going to play it. So they're going to play at LSU, Florida on November 19th. Florida's got Georgia next on the 29th. And, right after that, they've got a game in Arkansas that I think might be a bigger threat to their potential winning the East than even LSU. What do you think?
I would tend to agree. Florida is a really, really good run defense. Even in the Tennessee game, Tennessee did not have much success running the ball. And Florida has an opportunistic secondary, even if they make some mental errors. That's a bad combo for LSU, as a matchup. It's the same reason they lost to Wisconsin. Arkansas, on the other hand, that's willing and able to throw the ball down the field every play. As we said, Florida has prone to mistakes, lapses in the secondary, and they're going to feel a lot more pressure in that ball game, I think, to score. And given the fact that they threw 3 interceptions against Missouri, that's kind of where they're at. They're pretty erratic in the passing game. You want to put pressure on them to try to keep up scoring. And I totally agree with you. I think Arkansas is the more dangerous opponent for Florida right now.
And everybody's going to jump to say that LSU is probably going to beat Florida or whatever. LSU's back because of the turnover they've had at head coach, but they're still really bad at quarterback. I mean, they put up 42 against Missouri without a great game at quarterback because they had 130 and 163 from their running backs, and neither one of those was named Leonard Fournette. So 418 yards on the ground. So I think that I really do think that LSU is not going to be a great matchup for Florida. It's not going to be an interesting game. I think Arkansas is very well equipped to win that ball game. The thing I worry about with Arkansas is their defense.